Hi everyone. Thanks for joining me. I'm Kiran. I'll be your moderator for the day. The topic we have is a very interesting one. It's positively disrupting technology, which is essentially some brings together three words, which is purpose, input, and result. So it's going to be a reasonably wide topic, and we have a very eminent panel with us today. It would be great if the panelists spend a minute or two introducing themselves. I think we shall maybe start in alphabetic sequence. Dan can start if that's fine.
Hi, Kiran, and my colleagues, partner panelists here, fellow panelists here. Thanks for having me here this morning. Actually, I went to US for my master's in computer science, and then was with Motorola for about 5 years in Chicago, and then did my MBA from Booth School of Business, University of Chicago. Subsequent to this, was with Moneris Solutions, which is kind of a joint venture between Royal Bank of Canada and Bank of Montreal in product marketing in various different roles. After 11 years in Chicago, moved back to India to get started with Amix Technologies, which is along with a friend, got started about 14 years back. Today, we are kind of into the primarily catering to the North American market clients, where we offer various solutioning and services for across digital technology and digital experiences. So I'm the CEO and Managing Director of Amix Technologies. Thank you.
Great. Good to have you on board, Dan, today. The next panelist is a very eminent technologist, innovation driver. I would request Mahmood ji to just give a couple of words of introduction about himself.
Hi, everybody. Mahmood here. My academic background is I passed out a post-graduation in management from IMA. Worked in voluntary sector and cooperatives in India, and then joined Unilever, and Unilever then moved me around in the world. My last position in Unilever was global leader of innovation process. And what it basically meant was that we have to prepare the business and the communities in which we are working and designing the process in that sequence and using technologies to make this world a better place. So some of you probably know that Unilever got the Best Enterprise Award from Barack Obama in December 2015. And since then, I'm more and more getting associated with outside world. And in the outside world, I spend more time in India now, because if you have to make the world a better place, India has half of the global poverty. And then beside that, currently I'm speaking to you from United States, but before coming here, I was in Turkey, before that in UK. I also spent time in Mongolia. So that is a sort of way, so I move around, but my mission remains, how do we make this world a better place and use technologies to make the world a better place.
Very nice, and good to have you on board today, sir. Vinod, would you like to go next?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm an engineer with an MBA from the Indian Institute of Management in Bangalore back in '93. Stint as a management trainee, something I share with you, Mr. Khan, is my first job was with Unilever as a management trainee back in '93. 14 years stint with General Electric across the world, including India, the Netherlands, and Germany. All of my roles have been in corporate information technology, and I've spent the last 10 years back in India in a series of IT leadership roles with, among others, Walmart, where I was the CIO for the India market and the head of our B2B e-commerce P&L. And over the last 5 years, I've been the CEO here at Indus Towers, which is the second largest company in the world in terms of telecom infrastructure. We manage over 180,000 telecom towers in India across all partners.
Interesting. Thanks for joining us, Vinod, today. Ujjwal, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Thank you. Very privileged to be here. I've started my career in the US. I spent 12 years actually for school, then worked for Procter & Gamble and Lexmark. I got my MBA from University of Chicago, like Dan. has. From there, I moved to Europe with Wipro. Last 15 years I spent in Finland and London for Wipro, mostly working on cybersecurity and risk services. Then in 2013, I moved back to my home country to set up our operations here. And we've been doing various digital transformation programs, large digital transformation programs across energy, telco, and manufacturing space here in Turkey. And again, happy to be here. Thank you.
Great. So today's topic, we're going to be talking on three large areas. One is how do we prepare today's world or tomorrow's world for the technology disruptions that are going to happen. It's about how easily, how are we going to prepare them to receive it. So typically any technology adoption, there is this set of leaders who want to run towards every new technology without thinking through everything, and the laggards who come after everything is settled down. And in between, the whole shift happens where we discover the problems, figure out how to be regulated, how do we control it and balance it, and then finally let it open for the masses. So that whole preparation phase is one of the conversations that we will be having. The second is, of course, the kinds of technology that are coming in and what are the big disruptors as we see it in the market, which sectors, what kind of technology, what is changing fast, and what else is lagging behind in terms of disruption. Some sectors are still lagging behind, and it will be great to get the group's perspective on which ones are ahead, which ones are lagging behind in that sense also. And last but not the least, in terms of managing the aftermath, how do we manage this? Any change that happens, there are positives, there are negatives. How do we manage this? How do we handle the people who gain from it? How do we support the people who are losing because of it? How do we ensure that it works for everyone? That's the way I would like to structure the conversation. And I think we should start with what are the major disruptive technologies we see coming into today's world? What are the, if you want to call out any particular technology, any particular sector that's getting disrupted, let's quickly maybe touch upon that. Dan, would you like to start?
Yes, Kiran, in terms of, it's interesting, right? Like how the technology space has evolved over a period of time. If you see a couple of decades back, we are talking about the mainframes a few decades back, and then we moved to the .com era, and then it was all about the internet, right? Like later on, we talked about like the mobiles with the smartphones evolution, like how the mobiles are coming in, and ultimately, like what do we do as we started gathering more and more data? What do we do with the data? That became a big thing, right? So at every decade, if you see, there's one thing that dominated this one in the technology space. But interestingly, what we see right now in this current decade, like next decade that we foresee also, right? It's how we bring all these technologies together. That is going to be the key, right? The interrelation between these technologies, and interestingly, it doesn't stop with the technologies alone. How they interface with various industries, right? Segments, whether it's you're already seeing like especially with the COVID unfortunate reality that we kind of got hit is what is the kind of transformation that is the positive side, if you really look at it, the kind of transformation that has happened in the healthcare space, right? Like where virtual consultation with doctors and healthcare, everything is more of an accepted norm, even in developing countries or even underdeveloped countries, right? Like so even across the globe, it's happening. Likewise, similarly in education space, right? Like where with children not being able to go back to school for the last year and a half, how edtech that education has been being brought to their home. And this not just, we're not talking about like developed countries or anything, across the world. Again, these are all global changes. And how payments as kind of a digital currency, everything, the payments, the changes that have happened in the payment space, right? So these are all on the industries when you look at it, right? Likewise, if you look at it from a function standpoint, marketing, how the MarTech is happening, like the marketing and technology is coming together, right? In terms of HR, if we talk about HR analytics or anything like that, right? Like, so interestingly, now the next decade is going to be about the interface of these various technologies that have already been there, how they come together and talk to each other so that it gives a seamless experience for every individual out there as well. Wonderful. Just some initial thoughts there.
Mahmood sir, any thoughts on what technologies do you think are going to disrupt the world?
Well, let me give you a bit of background. First is, if you look at the global perspective now, there are about 7.5 billion people on the planet Earth, right? So if you and these numbers have suddenly multiplied in, if you had gone back to beginning of, let's say, 100 years ago, we had what, 2 billion people. So the 1 century has added 5 billion people, and a lot of it has happened is that the technologies have come which have been saving the lives. And over a period of in the decades, these technologies keep changing, but obviously the human population is the one which is what we have to care for. Now, the thing which is happening in all of these technological spaces, there is a gap. If you look at the industrial revolution, so there are a part of the world which is United States and Europe and other people who went ahead. But there are parts of the people who missed the boat at that point of time. And that gap continues to be there even today. So even the latest technologies we are talking about are, for example, now the new technology which are emerging currently, it is the developing world, whether you take it Indian subcontinent, whether you take it Africa, you take it parts of Latin America, and there is a issue is how do we see that these technologies are affordable or available to all these people. Obviously, there is a tremendous amount of progress being made where the affordability of technology is sort of being addressed constantly. And we can see that even the remotest part of the world, the technology are sort of being applied. But it is getting societies preparing for all of this, which is what makes a difference. So, for example, recently, Bangladesh has gone ahead of India and other countries because there they have prepared the society better than, let's say, other developing countries, the women empowerment. So it is that kind of a signal, broader signal, where you prepare the society and say these things will come, they will make your life better. But you have to have society which has to receive these technologies in that kind of a frame of mind.
Yeah. So what is coming? Let's speak about what are these things that are coming which worries people. Ujjwal, would you like to take a shot? Would you like to add what are the big things that are going to happen? What are the changes, disruptive technologies that you see are going to come into the world now?
I mean, I believe there's going to be major disruption coming from electricity, electrifying cars. I mean, it's a huge shift of power if you look at it. I mean, no pun intended. You have the gas companies that's been providing fuel for the cars. Now, big push from Elon Musk. There were electric cars there for decades on decades, but really made them available in some countries like Norway, the Nordics. They're actually overselling combustion engines. There's companies saying we'll turn into a country saying electrical cars by 2030, no more diesel, let's go all electric. So that will really change our lives. First, there's other ways to generate power than oil. So we need to look at the countries who are providing oil, how they will transform. Second, the companies who are drilling the oil, they will need to transform, look at what they're going to do. Of course, there's many uses for oil. And then next, of course, people will need to adapt to these new technologies, charge from their houses. There will be new businesses. Maybe they'll come to your car and charge your car if you're out of juice. And with that, there will be technologies there like blockchain that will come and possibly make a lot of this interaction possible. Like Dan was saying, integrate these systems because it's going to be necessary. You can be charging your car anywhere. How are you going to get the bill? Who's going to attest? Who sold you the electricity? What was the price of the electricity at that point? And maybe pay it with cryptocurrency. I mean, all these coming together will be big disruptor, I believe. But electricity will be big. And then I think blockchain is going to be big in two aspects, both as digital assets as well as ensuring there's transparency across parties. So thanks.
So Vinod, what do you think? Any big trends that you're seeing? Any sectors ahead, behind? Whatever you think about.
I'm thinking obviously of my own, which is telecom, and thinking, about how our role has changed both socially as well as, our license to operate suddenly seems to have gotten that much better. For instance, we are in the telecom towers business, and we used to face substantial resistance on fears of EMF and so on, and we don't anymore. But I want to actually hark back to the point around disruption. You see, Dan has talked about technologies impacting sectors, and I think, Memo has talked about readiness for it. And Eugene has brought up the point about, hey, this is going to disrupt, and that's exactly, I think, what I would like to talk about is that when you apply these technologies to these industries to solve problems, there's always going to be, an initial period of chaos. There's always going to be, some level of disruption in the markets, disrupting players, disrupting customers, disrupting the entire ecosystem. But I think there's a very relentless logic to this, that as you get past these ideas, as you get past the initial hump, and I think, Mehmood was absolutely right that developing countries probably have this huge, we used to talk about leapfrogging. You look at what's happening with data in India, and that is leapfrogging, to the extreme. I think now we'll have a problem if we take it away, because you'll have social unrest if people can't actually, access their data. And it is incredible to me the span in which these technologies have taken hold and disrupted these industries. You look at pricing, you look at the basic economics of various industries, they've just changed. But overall, it is my belief that these are all tending towards a convergence, towards a harmonization. And sure, there will be spans of time when everything looks out of balance and we worry for the losers of this world. But I think if you look at the water level and you look at the ability of these technologies to constructively create that future industry that benefits everybody, then I think we're getting there very fast with each of these changes. Because there is that relentlessness to this logic, the things that don't fit into this scheme get ironed out pretty quickly. And that is, by the way, true irrespective of the sector. So you look at vaccines, for instance, or mRNA, and that kind of stuff. Or you look at something in telecom and data and this whole satellite broadband, connecting every part of the world. It really doesn't matter which sector or which technology you're looking at. The harmonization, the convergence at speeds that we could never have imagined. And to my view, that's all good.
So I keep hearing this word about people who are losing out. So who has lost out on technology or disruptive technology? It took 40 years for an ECG to go from the size it was to what it was. Now everybody's got a mobile phone, and we see shifts happening rapidly. And I keep wondering, who are these? Who are these people who are losing out? Are there any people who actually lose out? Who are these? How do we avoid reaching situations? For example, technology is now moving beyond things like entertainment and access into things like health and education and mental wellness and even things like sleep and food. So when it becomes more basic or more core to human needs, then we have to be a little more careful that we don't have such quote unquote the losing population should not be there. How do we identify them? Are they there? How do we identify them? How do we prepare them? How do we avoid that?
Yeah, if you look at just take the figure, let's say microit, I think 4 of us have some kind of Indian connection, and Yusel also has some because he's working for Wipro. So if we take India has 1.4 billion people, right? So smart technology today is available to, let's say, about, let's call it 700 million to 900 million people. So there is still, let's say, that another 500 million people who are not on smart technology.
Having direct access.
That is one part. But the second is where I think Vinod is coming from. I like it is that if you see the broadband accessibility or the smart technology accessibility within the NCR region, and you just move about 100 kilometers south of Delhi, for example, and then you have a problem in rural areas in terms of broadband kind of thing, and in terms of like kind of conference we are having right now. We are sitting, I think, in about 3-4 countries right now, and we are able to have a seamless conversation, but that's not the case there. So it is that process. How do we sort of reduce the time for that? That first is bring those 500 million people who are not there in the smart technology at the moment. And the second is how do we make it seamless that everybody has equal opportunity? And why I want to bring it to this topic relevant is today the COVID, it has disrupted education very badly. For if you look at the young children from, I don't know, some of you might have seen, if you are interested in Bollywood movies, I don't know how many of you have seen a movie called Waqt. There is a dialogue where goes on in the Waqt. There is a character who is a rebellious and there is a character who is a rich man. So the rebellious characters tell the rich man, you can't sit in these ivory towers, glass towers, and throw stones on the others, so kind of thing. So it is the same thing. If 7.5 billion people, everybody wants to enjoy, then you have to think about everybody. You can't leave, oh, I'm not bothered about this person and that kind of thing, because that is going to hit you back. And hit you back means it doesn't allow the world to become a better place if certain sections of the society or certain groups are left behind.
Well, Vinod, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, so I mean, I think you actually started on the line of access. And I will bring in the aspect of affordability, and I will bring in the aspect of business models that cater to that affordability. So, Mahmood was talking about the 500 million delta. And you're all aware that there are, at least to my knowledge, a couple of large entrepreneurs that are looking to democratize access through, entry-level smartphones at pricing that we've not seen before, very frankly. And I think, the point is that you make an addressable business opportunity out of universal access and affordability. And that is happening. Again, if you look at it, the span before that technology comes into the early adopter and to the last person is decreasing sharply. And I believe that is not because of any altruistic, largely altruistic motives, though that is there, and I think that is growing, and that's a good thing, but simply because it makes business sense. I mean, the bottom of the pyramid we've talked about for years, but what you're really seeing, for instance, in telecom, or what you're really seeing in healthcare, when you talk about vaccine programs and so on, you're really talking about that it makes sense to get it out there faster because you want to be the first to market. You want to be the first to capitalize on this technology. And that's true both from the originators of the technology, the ecosystem that actually delivers this technology and harnesses it commercially. It's actually in everyone's interest to spread this thing as quickly as possible and as thinly as possible, if you understand what I mean.
Correct. Dan, would you like to add something?
Yeah, in terms of technology, right? Like when you see, it's like how intuitive it is to use technology. That's also something very important. That's what Apple, for example, the iPhones, when it came, everything, even kids, everybody, it's nowadays more and more, the user interface becomes much easier. It becomes easier to access it, right? Like it reaches out to the multiple wider section of age group, you can say demographics. And in addition to that, if you really see, when we talk about these technologies, the countries that have actually been deprived of technology to a certain extent or been lagging behind, could be sometimes they have a leg up in these kind of scenarios, right? With the advancements happening, because they don't have a legacy system to deal with when you're adapting to the latest one. Even for example, in India, if you really see back in the 80s or so, when they have the landline phones, and then the waiting period was too long for the landline phones, everything, right? Getting a phone. Suddenly when mobiles came, everything changed, right? So sometimes when you don't have, imagine if everybody had a landline, and then switching to mobile, that would be a transition. The time it would take to kind of make the switch should be much longer, actually. Similarly, when you talk about the 3G, 4G, 2G, 4G, 5G, everything, right? The countries that have not invested too much, I'm talking about like developing countries, not like necessarily fully countries that can afford to reinvest a lot. So when they invest in certain area, then reinvesting in a new technology very frequently becomes a big challenge. So countries that do not have like deal with legacy technologies will have a leg up. And from that context, what will also happen is, if you see countries like India, like where, as Mahmood was also pointing out, the policies, the government policies, right? These technology development and access is not limited only to private players kind of like making innovation and everything. It's also how the government support it, welcome it, that becomes a critical. So the concept of digital India, for example, was started a couple of years back, even pre-COVID. So given all that, it's culminating, it's now, because we already started thinking about it, the countries that have already started thinking about technology, everything, the COVID situation, post-pandemic, everything has accelerated that. But if you have to start, if you're thinking of it as a necessity, like rather than as a choice, like people, countries have chosen made it as a choice, they have a leg up in advantage. Likewise, in terms of inclusion of a broader section of the population, if you really see, there are, especially in developing countries and underdeveloped countries, there are a lot of literacy is a big challenge as well, right? Like there are a lot of people who have a challenge in reading and writing, especially. Imagine this, right? Like with a mobile phone, still you need to have that read and write everything. That's where the WhatsApp, SMS, how it kind of convert into WhatsApp and Telegram, all these social media, everything happened where only literates could participate in it. Now with the AI-driven, voice-driven technology coming in, right? Anyone, doesn't matter whether they're able to read and write, they could just pick up the phone because they know to turn on the phone and they're able to talk to the phone using voice chat, right? Like there, it opens up a wide section of the people which can be made inclusive. These are some of the thoughts I just want to share. Thank you.
Interesting. So, Ujjwal, coming from a more, as most people have described it, more equitable or equited part of the world, Europe, where societies at least are a little more even as compared to when it comes to India, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, etc., and other world, third world countries like South Africa and whatever, Africa and South America. What is your perspective on this? I mean, is the in a more equitable society, do you see technology disruptions leaving a lot fewer number of people disadvantaged?
It's a complex, I would say it's a complex question because, I mean, right, there is more money, economics maybe works a little bit faster, but regulation is also very important, right? So it is important in multiple reasons. One is how fast you can adapt, right? I mean, we talked about blockchain and cryptocurrency. Having your central bank have some regulation about it will make a big difference on the speed of adoption. But at the same time, there is the other aspect of this disruptive technologies, right? It might be giving some sections, some companies, huge amount of insight into your data. Regulation is important from that aspect too. So you might be adapting very fast, but you don't want to leave your privacy or other rights aside. And countries that are more versed in this should look at both aspects of it. Adaptation speed is very important. You need to adapt, I think, fast to stay behind or let other people leapfrog you. I completely see these, you couldn't get a landline, but you can get a mobile. You couldn't get a bank access, but from your mobile now you can buy cryptocurrency without having to go to a bank. All that is there, but both sides of regulation needs to be taken care to ensure that technology and the heavy weight that comes with it is distributed equally amongst all the players, I would say, and they need to nudge. They need to nudge people to adapt. We need to nudge regulators maybe to adapt also. It needs to be there. And I think, I was saying survival of the fittest is how this planet became what it is and how we are here. So there is little people can do over a few decades standing in front of technology or advancement, right? So I think things will happen. We just need to make sure that it happens in any society, not in more advanced or lagging behind societies, in a way that everybody benefits the max out of it. And that I think sits with the regulators as well as the kind of big minds that we see here maybe in this event to come together and generate.
So would a more equitable society have lesser marginalized people when it comes to technology disruptions? I'm sorry, I'm forcing you into a corner there.
So it is. That is people's choice. How marginalized they want to be. It is like having a centralized company versus a distributed company, right? You can be more unique and marginalize yourself in many different ways, or you can be a part of the mainstream. Now, it is I think it should be a personal choice. We shouldn't make it this happens because you don't have the finances, your education and all that. Everybody should be equal, should have equal access for sure. But if they want to be marginalized, they should be.
Correct. So the right to say no is also equally available to all.
Right.
Yes, but nudge the right way, I would say. People should know what they're getting into when they're making or saying no. So,
the bright side, Kiran, of the speed of this is that you hit the roadblocks also early. So, to the point that Yujil is making, when privacy becomes a concern, it becomes a universal concern. It blows up in everybody's face. So we quickly then get our technology hats around it and start figuring out how do you solve this problem. So I believe acceleration is a good thing because you'll also hit all the roadblocks faster, hopefully surmount them faster. So these are not festering problems in the sense of, non-technology areas. These are problems that you hit, they explode. Again, there is creative disruption. The guy who fixes the problem first wins, and then you democratize that.
So Mahmood, just coming back to your point, societies that refuse or don't want to adapt to disruptive technology, is that like Yujil was saying, is it something that should be their choice, or is it something we will consider marginalized and try to push it in?
No, I don't think per se the societies would be sort of, in fact, but particularly the good news is that all the technologies we are talking about in the new world, universally, I have not found anywhere, because we had seen earlier in 1960s and 70s of that there used to be sort of resistance to technologies, but not now. Today, actually, there is a universal acceptance to all the technologies you name. You talk about blockchain, you talk about anything. People are, everybody wants to have a smartphone. Everybody wants to be, sort of connected to broadband. Everybody wants to be part of a digital technology. So I'm seeing everybody in terms of in fact, the kind of, if you look at the current, this latest pandemic, it is the developed world which is having a resistance to, for example, going vaccination. It's like I'm sitting in United States and there is a 20-30% of population don't want to get vaccinated. They are the one who are having resistance, not actually the developing world. Developing world is at a very rapid pace accepting, bring on, okay, fine, make us safe. Bring broad technology. We all want to have it, kind of thing.
So Vinod is arguing that because it's happening faster there, that 30% is standing out. India, we are far away from 30%. So even if there was a 30% who's saying no, we don't know yet because we've not hit that roadblock.
Correct. Yeah. And I think the good news of that, because and I know Mr. Sharma, who is sort of managing the application in India, he's a happy man to say, okay, in one day they were able to do more than what, 20 million people?
Yeah, yesterday.
So,
no, last week.
In that sense, but obviously it is that, yeah, that's a different discussion. But for the time being, it is that the developing countries are very open in terms of the new technologies which are coming. So that is where I do feel, because I'm being an eternal optimist, I do feel that there is going to be a bridging of this in terms of that all these societies which had been left behind, probably these new technologies are the one which will give them a bit of a catch-up kind of a opportunity.
So actually, this is a huge raging debate, especially in Europe, and I was trying to corner Ujjwal into making a comment on that. But societies choosing to, do we allow societies to choose to not participate? And that is something which is still going on there. I'm not getting into that. So those are a little more political issues we should stay away from. But overall, I think any last points? I think we've had a great conversation. I would love to get any quick inputs because I think we're running out of time before we wrap up. Any last points anybody would like to add? Any thoughts that you'd like to give the audience with?
I'll just add one comment. As I was talking that I had read about the organizers of this conference, I had seen bit of material and videos. I'm very impressed that if we get more and more of this kind of conference where we start talking of a language which is harmonious, where we are being caring, where we are seen as that, okay, we want to bring the positivity across the societies and the countries and on the planet, I think it's a very, very good idea and it's a very wonderful thing to do.
Great.
Great. So I'd like to add like 2 points like there, right? Like when it comes to technology, we should not feel pressured, like saying like, okay, there's so much technology out there saying, whether it's individual or the countries, like saying, okay, we have to adapt to all the technologies. It's not practical because even companies, like technology keeps evolving and changing, right? Like over a period of time. Simple, even companies, when you look at it, in 90s, you talked about Motorola and the Telecom, right? Like in the phones when you talk about, then came Nokia, right? And after the smartphones, everything, Nokia or Motorola are not necessarily the leading players in that space, right? So how things change when you look at it. So even companies struggle that way. So it's the individuals many times in many countries, they look up to the governments also to see like, okay, reassure them. Because when you talk about individuals, there's so much technology out there, you get overwhelmed sometimes, right? Like how much the technology I would know as a being a person in the technology versus my kids, what they would know, my daughters would know, it's far different, right? Like the way they adapt is much faster with the younger generation more and more. So one thing is the countries kind of guiding team members like how to do it, like not get overwhelmed is one thing. Another one point I will finish up with my this last point from my end. When you talk about technology, it's a mindset change, right? That's happening. There's a timing for everything. How without, for example, the smartphones, Uber would not have happened, or the Zomatos of the world would not have happened, right? Like until the smartphone came, where the GPS and all that got enabled. That otherwise it's not practical. So there is a timing. So from that perspective, similarly, if you see a car earlier, if you had a Lexus or something, if there was a repair, like you would go try to take it to the how well the services and everything could be different. They would try to see if you can take it to the nearest center and they would replace with a new car, all that. But now with the electric car, Tesla, everything, they would say, okay, just wait there. Remotely, they would try to fix the issue, right? Like it's not like you don't need to necessarily take it to a service center. So there's a mindset change happening, not necessarily from the company side, but also from the individual consumer side. So given that, the innovators should challenge themselves, not worry about the legacy, how things have been done. They should start thinking about what the new future could be, right? And they might propose solutions which the consumers would be open to adapt to. Thank you.
Ujjwal, do you want to add anything?
We need to innovate full speed ahead. This is, I mean, many reasons for it. First one, it is fun, right? But at the same time, it is good for everyone. And people need to adapt. You need to adapt regardless. I mean, the first thing I've seen when I joined PNG on my desk was a book, Who Moved My Cheese? Okay, and basically, I'm sure most of you would have read it. It talks about if you adapt or you need to adapt and the reason you should adapt, right? So I think we should all innovate. We should all adapt, and I think it would be a better future for everyone. This is my view.
In fact, that's so beautiful that you just said that, because I was just thinking about what Mehmet said. And when we talk about society, when we talk about government, when we talk about industry, that's every one of us. I'm a citizen, I vote for my government, and I work in industry. So you're actually talking about this one person at a time. And I think it's fundamental laws of behavior that while you can't predict an individual's behavior, you can predict behavior across billions of individuals. And I think if you look at the averages, so to your point, Kiran, what gives me comfort is that this lot will move. So I can elect today not to do it, and tomorrow an event can happen, or tonight going home an event can happen that makes me change my view about this technology.
Got it.
And I think, at scale, individuals learn, individuals aspire for a better future. So to the point that Mehboob made, I think, you look at this and you can safely trust that these groups of individuals will, as a society, do the right thing, as a business, do the right thing. And as a government, obviously, might take a little longer than the other two, but we'll do the right.
That's very well said. Thanks very much, all of you. It's been a great discussion on a especially difficult topic. I frankly didn't know what we were getting into at the beginning of it, and I think it's been great. Thanks to each one of you contributing and making your point clear. Thanks very much. We should just hold on.